Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Growing Claims Payouts Reflect Long-Term Care's True Value with Mike Anderson. This is Jordan, the Marketing Coordinator here at AIM. Today's webinar will be recorded and then later posted on our website. This does mean that all attendees will be automatically muted so that we get a quality recording. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the chat box and we'll try to answer them throughout the presentation. But if we're unable to get to all the questions, we'll have a member of our marketing team reach out to you individually to make sure you get that answered. Before we get started, we'd like to invite you to join us for next week's webinar on Tuesday, November 19th at 9 a.m. Pacific Time. Join Regional Marketing Director Derek Lape in exploring innovative hybrid long-term care models that can help you meet your clients' needs for financial security and personalized care solutions. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mike so that we can go ahead and get started. Take it away, Mike.
Thanks, Jordan. Appreciate all the hard work you do to help us pull these things off. Good morning, everybody. Appreciate you making your time available. We know there's a lot of things going on. Folks are pretty busy right now, and I certainly appreciate you taking time to join us. We do think that this is part of an ongoing, really important message. We're continuing to talk about long-term care even during AEP. Some people are wondering why, and the answer to that question is that it's an everyday problem that your clients need help solving. You're going to see it, I think, in pretty stark relief here over the next few minutes. And I think it's important to remember, whether we like this or not, and regardless of what your area of specialty is, long-term care is a lot bigger problem than deciding whether to change a client's meds up from a Plan G to a Plan N. We understand there's going to be some premium savings there for sure, and probably a lot of teeth gnashing going on about what I just said on this call, and that's okay. But a Medicare beneficiary without a supplement has a limited financial exposure, okay, and it's important to know that. But when a beneficiary's got a long-term care event, every single thing is at risk, and the basics here are about the same as they've always been. The 9 out of 10 rule applies, and if you're not familiar with that, 9 out of 10 people over the age of 50 have not had a conversation with someone who can help them about long-term care. That means that 90% of that population group is self-funding. A lot of folks erroneously use the term self-insuring in that situation. That's not what it is. It is straight up self-funding. Okay, so other things that you've heard us talk about a bunch about pennies on the dollar, which is really what this costs. And it is important to remember that any plan is better than no plan. I'm going to give you a specific example. Actually, the agent that helped me with this is on the call this morning. And when we get a little closer to the end, we're going to look at a very specific case that goes back a ways, but it just shows you how quickly something can come into play and how beneficial it can be to the folks that it helps. And it's really important to remember that all you need to do as a start is to ask people to sit down and talk to them about how to protect their retirement plan, because that's really what you do with long-term care, is you're helping them protect that retirement plan. So now, as we're starting to look at some serious numbers here, public service announcement, if you will, the numbers that I've used in these slides here today came from the American Association for Long-Term Care Insurance. They aggregated that by going to a number of different sources rather than duplicating that work. I just went out to their website. It's a great resource if you've not been out there. Would encourage you to take a look. Okay, so our 2025 reality, 2025 is coming around the corner. You're going to see here in a minute, the claims numbers are very, very steadily increasing. Along with that, for a couple reasons, one of which we'll talk about at the end of the presentation here, awareness about long-term care is growing by leaps and bounds, all right? And the part that we're going to talk about later, which isn't really factored into that awareness, is these upcoming LTC payroll tax opportunities, similar to what happened in Washington back in 2021. It's kind of hard to believe that's almost 4 years old. Actually, one of the folks that's kind of auditing the call today is something of an authority in that particular area, has been significantly involved in it as a watchdog, if you want to call it that, of the legislature in Washington. And we're pleased that they were able to join us as we're having this conversation as well. But this awareness thing is crucial to understand, because for the first time, we've got a product set that pretty much can handle anything that someone you have a conversation with needs help with, okay? And what I mean by handle anything is that if you got folks that have age challenges, and we get an inquiry once a week or so from an agent saying, hey, I got somebody who's 82 years old and they look like Superman or Wonder Woman, and what can we do for them? Well, for the longest time, we didn't really think we had anything, and then we realized that we do. So we've got an age solution. We've got a price solution. The extended care products that are available through some of the, I'm going to call them non-traditional carriers, do a phenomenal job of making options available for clients. And one of the things, if you don't get your head around any other thing coming out of this presentation today than what I'm going to say next, write this down. We, as an industry, have to stop letting great be the enemy of good, because we have some great opportunities, but those are expensive opportunities, all right? But they do pay off, and they pay off well. But we've got also good opportunities. And the third part of that good opportunity thing is we can solve underwriting problems for the most part. Pretty much the only underwriting issue we can't solve is dementia or cognitive impairment, depending on what it is that you want to call it, okay? We can solve anything else but that. So when you get somebody, you're talking to them, or you know that your neighbor was just diagnosed with Parkinson's disease or something that's really not a good thing, you've got a solution for them in most states, okay? Not all states. We're headquartered in Washington. In Washington, we can't have nice things. So some of those alternative solutions, those secondary solutions, we don't have them here. They don't have them in California because, well, our friends in California aren't allowed to have nice things either. That aside, most of the rest of the country has these things available. Don't forget that they're there. Don't automatically say, we can't help them because you know about some health situation, okay? Some other numbers to consider as we go along. We currently have about 1.3 million people in nursing homes, and that occupancy is, as you can see, it's about 80%. And also remember, too, that 1.3 million is really a pretty small number overall, because 73% of the claims that are ongoing, they begin at home, okay? So, and we've got the solutions that are tailor-made for home situations. We can solve for that. Other numbers, you can see these. I'm not going to read them. We're going to take a look at some other numbers, some really stark numbers to look at here. None of this, I think, comes as any great surprise if you've been paying attention, okay? But this is the reality that we're facing right now, and these are the situations that we're dealing with. So those are your other numbers, and here we have our other numbers part 2, okay? I'm going to give you a minute to take a look at this, because it's going to tie back into these claims numbers and these utilization numbers that we are looking at and that we look at on a regular basis. They tie in with that all the time. And I'm hopping around here and grabbing out the docs I'm going to need here in a minute to talk about that claims specific situation. I want to make sure that I've got that right here, so when we transition to it, we are ready to roll on that. But as you can see, the impact of not having long-term care is staggering. We talk about it conceptually, but this is real world, real numbers stuff here, all right? This is what families have to do when they are dealing with a situation where they either didn't know or passed on the opportunity to fund a plan. And so now they are self-funding that plan, and they're self-funding that plan by skipping vacations and cutting from full-time to part-time and changing their work schedules. And those that are working, in addition to the 40-ish hours or so they put in at their job, they're putting in another 20 or so taking care of that family member. This is really, really seriously stark stuff to look at and to think about. Okay, so now we're going to look at numbers. So in 2023, we're actually going to work backwards. This is when the impact of what happened with COVID really became obvious. Okay, you're looking at $14.2 billion paid out. All right, that's the 10% of the marketplace is getting $14.2 billion. Because remember, I told you, 90% of the people that you know that are at your church or your tennis club or in your neighborhood, whoever they are, 90% of those people don't have coverage. So the 10% that do, this is what's being paid out on their behalf. Okay, and out of that 90% that we just were talking about a minute ago, 90% of those people were significantly altering their work schedule to be able to take care of a family member. Impact. Okay, in 2022, you can see the numbers here. Okay, you can, if you're counting backwards, you can see that it was ticking up pretty significantly here, almost $1 billion more year over year. All right, you see the numbers, and this was a big topic. The female claimants was a big topic when the long-term care business first made the decision that it was going to go to gender-based pricing. A lot of complaining, a lot of gnashing of teeth, pearl clutching, rending of garments, et cetera about that. But the reality is it's almost 2 to 1 on female claimants versus male claimants. And the greatest majority of those happen in that 81 to 90 year old age range. Okay. And remember, along the way in 2022, 40% of that self-funding group, 40% of those people had to go from full-time employment to part-time employment to be able to balance the burden of caregiving. That's the impact that not having that conversation has. That's the impact of someone's decision to self-fund the ability to take care of a family member. Okay, 2021. All right. Again, almost another $1 billion in growth from 21 year over year to 22, 336,000 claimants. Okay. As this is going on, almost 50% of that group that's self-funding, they're cutting out or limiting personal activities like vacation and time off so that they are able to provide adequate care for a family member. When you're not asking these people about helping them protect that retirement plan, that is one of the down the line effects. And it's really important to know, and if you've been on my calls, you've heard me stress this, these people that are in your personal 90%, they know who you are and they know what you do. In all likelihood, they are probably surprised that you haven't approached them and offered to help. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a hard conversation. You know, there will be some difficulty to it, but Americans are used to difficult conversations. They've got to have difficult conversations about the financing of homes and other things that go on along the way. This difficult conversation is going to be impactful at gigantic levels, and we'll look at some very specific pieces of the gigantic levels here in just a few minutes. All right, so that's 2021. 2020, not quite the amount of growth there, and it was very difficult to find out for 2020 where within these numbers the impact of COVID could be measured. I'm sure you remember the stories about deaths in nursing homes, et cetera. The one thing that the COVID memories, if you want to call it that, that's probably not the right word, but remembering what happened there should crystallize for you is that you don't want to be in a nursing home, okay? Seniors that were in home care situations that were on claim and able to stay at home, you didn't hear a lot of stories about them passing away because they were in a singular person environment. All right. But again, looking at this 11.6 billion that's paid out. All right. Don't know that COVID impact, like I said, but I can tell you emphatically that a caregiver, a self-funder in 2020 was spending an additional 21 hours over and above their job taking care of that family member. Okay. So as we're going through this, you're seeing the financial impact and the financial relief, if you want to call it that having this coverage brings about. You're also seeing the stark, staggering impact that the folks that don't make that decision are dealing with, okay? And then 2019, this was the last year that we had numbers available, okay? So you're talking about going back up to 2023, you're looking at, just in 5 years, it increased by $3.2 billion in terms of what was being paid out on behalf of these people. And some of this is the same claim that's an ongoing thing, and we'll talk a little bit more about claims length and such here. And again, 310,000 claimants. Another contrasting number, if you want to call it that, 29% of the folks who are caregiving for self-funding were using personal monies out of their pocket as part of the caregiving situation. We don't know much in the way of specifics there, but it's just another other piece that you're looking at with this. So the 5-year total, $62 billion paid out. That's a ton of money. It's a ton of value that people are getting for a pennies on the dollar proposition when somebody's asking them for help with their retirement plan and they're engaging in that help. And remember, along the way, this is what was occurring. Leave it here for a minute. I can make these slides available. We always get those requests. This is not consumer approved, but you can certainly take and tuck these into some of the narrative of conversations potentially that you're having with folks. This one really caught me kind of surprised down here. 10% of the people that are in that self-funding group, that self-funding network, because we're not talking about the claimants potentially, we're talking about family members, 10% of them had to take a pay cut, probably as a result of reducing time, other things like that, to be able to take care of this. So opportunity assessment. What does this tell us? Well, some of what it's telling us, we've told you before, and we're going to keep telling you over and over and over again. Because if you're not doing this, and I know who's on this call, and I know that we've got agents that actively pursue this on an ongoing basis. If you're not, you're missing a gigantic revenue opportunity for your agency. And I covered that, I think, in the last webinar that I did, or one of the last couple webinars that I did. I've been on a steady stream of different long-term care related projects. Okay. So, and to give you an idea of the opportunity to help somebody, was in a conversation with an agent that I've worked with forever, and knew that this webinar was coming up. We were talking about it a little bit, and he just told me kind of out of nowhere that he had this claim that had just culminated, and I'll talk about that here in a second. He had a claim that had culminated in the early part of spring of this past year, and the best they could come up with regard to calculations on that, and this is a claim that dated back 19 years, okay, approximate payout on that claim, $2.2 million. $2.2 million, all right? This is a policy that went into force in 2001. The claimant went on claim in 2005, and at the time, the benefits with compound inflation had grown to about $75,000 a year in available money, but because of the way the compounding worked on that situation, they continued to grow, and by the time they got to the end of the claim, and this involved a stroke, and this involved someone being at home and who actually had somebody coming in to take care of him, and some of what was taken care of with regard to private care was paid out of pocket. all right? But at the end of that, they were looking at more than $2.2 million being paid out on behalf of this claimant. And at the end, the available money on a monthly basis was $13,500, having more than doubled along the way. Okay, so part of this opportunity assessment is the sense that you are going to be able to help people out. And believe me, having been through this personally with probably one of the 3 or 4 people that I'm not married to and I'm closest to in the world, seeing somebody who has some sort of a significant medical event and doesn't have that help, and you see them at a barbecue or in your neighborhood with a walker or a cane, it's a horrible feeling. It's an absolutely horrible feeling. In my particular case, and if you've been on my webinars, you've heard me talk about this a little bit before. I made several presentations, if you want to call it that, pitches to this very close friend and spouse. I wasn't going to actually do the sales piece of it. I was going to hand that off because while I am licensed, I don't sell, so I'm not competing against the folks that are on the call, but I was going to hand this off to somebody and get them taken care of. The decision was made by the spouse that this was not something that they needed. So they made a mistake. That mistake resulted in them having to crack open my buddy's 401k to pay for care. They used some of that to pay off their house because they weren't going to be able to have house payment on an ongoing basis. And now they survive basically on the remnants, if you want to call it that, of that 401k plan. They survive on that and the remnants of a small inheritance that had come through. So the closing question: are you the one who's offering to help? Or are you the one who could have offered to help? That's where you're at right now. The next phone call, whichever way you go, it's going to say something about you. But the next phone call that you take, you have this opportunity. And honestly, no disrespect to anybody, but it doesn't matter if you're in the middle of AEP. You can make some notes about the fact that you need to go meet with Sam and Sally Smith once AEP is over with, but just ask them, has anybody offered to help you with this? 9 times out of 10, we know what the answer to that question is going to be. Okay, so you've got that. All right, so now we're going to turn our attention to the, as promised, payroll tax updates. The big one that everybody's looking at, actually 2 things everybody's looking at. First of all, if you were paying attention, you know that the state of Washington's plan called WA Cares faced a referendum decision in front of the public a week ago as part of the election. And frankly, because of some, let's just call it crafty, clever wording of the initiative, the effort to make it voluntary failed. And so the folks who are in the WA Cares plan remain in the WA Cares plan. And the folks who have insurance continue to go down that particular path. Okay, so it's no secret that California, the perception is California is going to be next up, and that a lot of what they put together looks a lot like what Washington has. Okay, there's some in the weeds stuff. There's a proposed cap, depending on which one of the 5 possibilities that the task force came up with, depending on which one they go with, could move it as high as 3%. And there's a belief that I know I have a couple California agents that I've talked at some length with about this on the call. There's a belief that it's going to be a shared cost where the employer is actually going to pay some of it and the employees will pay some of it. The California task force, and this is the only state that I know of that actually put together a task force, they're recommending the availability of private insurance as an opt-out. They don't really know what the actuarial cost of that is going to be, but they don't think it's as high as they originally expected. The California state legislature is about to be sworn in. The new legislature, if you will, is about to be sworn in, and the expectation was that there was going to be significant turnover there, and the committee leadership and legislative priorities would likely shift That said, it's also no secret that there is a tremendous amount of concern about the budget in California and the impact that Medicaid long-term care, and I think they actually call it Medi-Cal down there, long-term care expenses have with that. One important thing to note, and the California folks I know are aware of this, but if you're an observer from a distance, one important thing to note is that, or actually two, California legislative business is a year-round enterprise. So they're not like a lot of the states where they come together for 2 or 3 months and they go back to what it is they normally do. All right, so that's the first thing. The second thing is there is a mid-February deadline for legislation to be introduced. If the primary piece of legislation isn't introduced by approximately the 15th of February of 2025, then it may be a situation where nothing happens in 2025 for that. And it will be significantly impactful if they move forward. There are approximately 16,500,000 employees. In California, that's more than 4 times the number of employees that the state of Washington had. And for those of you that were either involved in Washington or saw Washington from a distance, it was straight up insanity, because the refusal on the legislature's part to communicate and to coordinate with the private market meant that those carriers were absolutely overrun. So, all right, moving on. New and kind of out of left field, state of Hawaii, during their 2024 legislative session, they passed a bill that requires the creation of a long-term care plan to achieve the financial goals they set forth to make LTC services available. The expectation is that there will be additional movement on this in 2025. There were 12 Senate seats, and I didn't have time to go through all these different legislative races and tally stuff up and such. So I do know what was at risk. I don't know what happened with it. All 51 of the House seats in Hawaii were up for election last week. 12 seats in the Senate were up as well. So New York has been around for a couple of years. They had 150 assembly seats. That's all of what they had in the assembly, or what we would call the House of Representatives. Those were up for election. All 63 Senate seats were up for election. So there was the potential there for some significant overhaul as they come into session here in the next few weeks. How that's going to play out, it will be interesting to see. The original bill was put forth in 2022. A second bill was put forth in 2023, and they're continuing to try to craft something to make it work. They have 8,700,000 employees. So if something crazy happens in California and New York, both happen in the same year, we will be having what they call the golden age of long-term care. All right. The difficulty in New York is that individual products are extremely limited, and group products are even more limited simply because of the domicile rule there, and so many of the carriers that are in that group or worksite market don't want to to spend $10 million to build a building just to be able to sell long-term care in that state. There's an interim report for the state of Maryland. We're moving on here, that's expected by the end of this year. The legislature agreed at the beginning of the year to require Department of Aging to bring in an independent consultant to conduct the dreaded study on options. Where we end up with that study remains to be seen. Okay, Massachusetts put together a LTC study commission, so they kind of mirrored California. The Democrats were in control of everything and have been for the last couple of years. All seats were up for election just last week along the way, so how that's going to play out remains to be seen. Minnesota has been working on this and bouncing around on this and looking at different ways to privatize it for a while. There was talk that they were going to try to shove a bill through before the election took place. Not any confirmation that that in fact happened. They have about half as many employees as what the state of Washington did with similar product availability. So that would be a situation where folks could actually get insurance. The bill that the draft bill that was put together ends up looking strikingly similar to what Washington did with about a $36,500 pool of benefits with a payroll tax. Nothing known about potential exemptions, and those can always be added when it's in committee or brought on board as amendments when they get farther along. They were looking at doing more work to embrace hybrids and use some of the light hybrids where you just have a straight up life policy with long-term care without some of the crazy second to die strategies and things like that. Pennsylvania is still bouncing around. The original bill was introduced there in August of 22, similar to WA Cares. Just been kind of sitting there for a while, and what's going to happen with it, nobody really seems to know. That's one place that seems to, I don't want to say they're locked down, but right now there's nothing in place. There's no hue and cry to make anything happen with that. There's also talk that a number of other states, Michigan, Illinois, and some others are all toying with it, but no discernible movement. Legislatures are all going to begin convening here in the next few weeks, depending on how things went in those particular states. Seems like specifically the blue states, you could be looking at some movement in some of these places here over the first 90 days of the year. So as it stands right now, that's what we've got. Again, they're all going to come back to work on that part-time job for most of them here at the beginning of next year, which will start that moving along. That is going to bring us to the end of this presentation. As always, if you've got questions, give me a call. Important to note, because a lot of times coming out of these webinars, we get a stampede of folks wanting to get contracted, all right? The ever-changing compliance landscape that we deal with requires that before we're able to make any real information available for agents in the field about, I got this couple, I got that couple, I got this business, etc., you have to be appropriately licensed with the carriers involved in that, and because they have to be able to confirm that you have the appropriate licensure and CE for most of the compact states. All right, so be aware of the fact that it's not going to be a situation where we're able to fire out illustrations, because we got to be able to, the carrier's got to basically be able to confirm that you are lined up correctly. We're not going to put ourselves in a situation where we have a compliance issue with that. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and finish up. As I said, appreciate y'all making your time available. We got another long-term care webinar coming up next week. I think Derek's doing that one. Jordan, is that correct?
Yep. Derek's doing hybrid. So hybrid
long-term care model. Hybrid long-term care. Big part of what it is that we're doing. Be sure and join us for that. It will also be at 9 a.m. on next Tuesday the 19th, 9 a.m. Pacific time. You'll see some information on that coming out later this week. So I'll be following up with everybody on the call here today just to see if there's any other questions or anything else that we can help you out. Be sure that if you return the call to me, that you ask about the extended care options that we got that we may not have talked about before, available in most states, again, not including Washington and California for sure. So, all right, well, thanks everybody. Appreciate you making your time available. Jordan, appreciate you doing all the behind the scenes work there, the wizard behind the curtain. And we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Take care. Bye now.